Today we're looking at the history of Yellowstone National Park. Hello, welcome to the Daily Bellringer. Please don't forget to subscribe and take a look at the questions down in the description. Also, don't forget to check out dailybellringer.com for more resources that go with Bellringer videos. Yellowstone National Park, which covers over 2.2 million acres in the northwest region of Wyoming and crosses over into Montana and Idaho, was designated by President Ulysses S. Grant as the first national park in the United States and the world in 1872. The name Yellowstone is derived from the Yellowstone River that flows through the park, which was named Yellowstone by Native American tribes in the region due to the yellow sandstones along its banks. There is archaeological evidence that Native American people were living in and around Yellowstone as early as 11,000 years ago. On Lewis and Clark's expedition to the Pacific Ocean, they heard stories of this area but did not venture through it themselves. The area was described as an almost mythical or magical area, as it was known for fire and brimstone due to the active geysers in the area. A member of Lewis and Clark's expedition, John Coulter, joined a group of fur trappers that came into what is today Yellowstone National Park in 1806. He returned with stories of boiling mud and water shooting out of the ground. Most people declared him to be crazy and dismissed his stories as being myth. In 1859, U.S. Army engineer and officer William Raynolds, along with naturalist Raynolds Hayden, attempted a 2-year expedition into the region. Poor weather conditions prevented them from reaching Yellowstone, and then the Civil War broke out and their expedition was canceled. In 1869, David Folsom, Charles Cook, and William Peterson organized what became known as the Folsom-Cook-Peterson expedition, the first formal expedition of Yellowstone. Shortly thereafter, in 1870, others were inspired to explore the area, and another expedition led by Henry Washburn, Nathaniel Langford, and Gustavus Doane made another trip into Yellowstone and made detailed records of what they saw. The following year, in 1871, Raynolds Hayden, who had failed in 1859 to reach Yellowstone, returned this time with photographer William Henry Jackson and painter Thomas Moran. They collected pictorial evidence of the beauty of the park, and Hayden returned to Washington and began to argue that the region should be set aside and protected. Congress agreed, and on March 1, 1872, Ulysses S. Grant signed the Act of Dedication, which officially declared Yellowstone as being protected and America's first national park. Interestingly, many people that lived in the region argued against creating a national park and urged the government to make it smaller. They argued that the park would hurt the economy and they would not be able to mine, hunt, or cut down lumber in the area. So many people continued to hunt and harvest resources from the park, and there was little the government could do about it. Furthermore, there were several conflicts between the government officials and Native American tribes in the region. But in August of 1886, Yellowstone was put under military control and Fort Yellowstone was established at Mammoth Hot Springs. Now the U.S. military patrolled the park and chased out poachers who had almost hunted several species to the verge of extinction in the park. The U.S. military would now oversee the park for over 20 years. During this time, more and more visitors were making their way to the park to see the natural wonders. Both the Northern Pacific and Union Pacific built rail lines carrying tourists to see the park. As automobiles became more prevalent, more roads were built through the park by the early 1900s. With more people visiting, there was also a need for more lodging. In 1904, the Old Faithful Inn, built near the Old Faithful Geyser, was constructed to attempt to meet the needs of visitors.
As more tourists came to see Yellowstone, the government began to realize the military was probably not the right organization to be managing a tourist destination. In 1916, Congress passed the National Park Service Organic Act, which was signed by President Woodrow Wilson. The act created the National Park Service to manage and maintain America's national parks. The National Park Service officially took control of Yellowstone in 1918. Interestingly, many of the first park rangers in Yellowstone were still associated with the military, as many of them were veterans of World War I. During the Great Depression, the Civilian Conservation Corps, part of President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, built many new structures, roads, and facilities throughout Yellowstone. During World War II, everything came to a halt in Yellowstone. Few visitors came here, and little to no maintenance of park facilities were made as the nation was focused on fighting the war. When the war ended, there was a sudden rush of visitors to the parks, which caused many of the facilities and roads built before the war to deteriorate quickly. But to celebrate the National Park Service's 50th anniversary in 1966, Congress gave more funding to the national parks and several buildings and roads were updated. To this day, the park is ever-changing and being updated. Each year, Yellowstone draws an average of 4 million visitors to see its natural wonders and beauty. So with that, hopefully you learned something, and thanks for watching.